It all started with something so simple. I needed a little help around the house. I didn't ask to give birth to me. Those were her words. They're seared into my memory like a brand. And if you think that's the shocking part, oh, honey, you haven't heard anything yet. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Now, where do I even begin? I suppose I should start at the beginning. I always prided myself on being a good mother, a great mother even. I did everything right, or so I thought. Her name is Ashley, and from the moment she was born, she was my world. I was a young mother, a single mother, but I worked my fingers to the bone to give her the best life I possibly could. Every birthday was a production, every Christmas a spectacle of lights and gifts, and every scraped knee a cause for a hug and a box of tissues. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I sacrificed a lot for her. A lot. Late nights, skipped vacations, new clothes for her instead of for me. You name it, I did it. We had our squabbles, of course. What mother and daughter don't? Teenage rebellion, eye rolls, the slammed doors, the whole 9 yards. But nothing major. Nothing that ever made me think our bond was in jeopardy. I always figured that's the nature of teenage years and that everything would work itself out in time. As Ashley grew up, got married, and even had her own little girl, I thought we'd become even closer. That our bond, built on years of trust, love, and frankly, financial support, would be unbreakable. Oh, how wrong I was. The problems, as they often do, started small, subtle digs, little passive-aggressive comments. Mom, can you just try to keep up with the times? When I was on the phone. Then, seriously, Mom, do you have to wear that when I dress to go to her place? The tiny paper cuts turned into something bigger, something uglier. It was about 3 months ago when my health really started to deteriorate. You see, I'm getting older, and I'm no longer the energetic, on-the-go woman I once was. Doctor visits were increasing, and I started needing help around my house. I always had a cleaning lady before, but the budget was now a bit more restrictive. I had asked Ashley for help. Nothing complicated, just some tidying up. Now, you have to understand my house isn't exactly a mess. I kept things clean, but I started needing more help and doing the heavy-duty cleaning became impossible. My own home, you see, had turned into a burden instead of a sanctuary. I was getting overwhelmed with the day-to-day. So one Saturday morning, I called her. I said, Ashley, sweetie, I could really use a hand. I'm having a bit of a hard time keeping up with the house. Would you be able to come over and help me out this weekend? Simple as that. Expecting a normal daughter-mother chat or conversation. Maybe a little grumbling, but help nonetheless. Her response? Silence. A long, heavy silence that just hung there on the line. Then the words, the ones that sliced right through my heart, the ones I never in a million years expected to hear from my own daughter. I didn't ask to give birth to me? Can you even imagine the sheer audacity of it all? It was like a cold bucket of ice water splashed in my face. I must have been standing there, mouth agape for a good few minutes before I could find my voice. Ashley, I managed to croak out, "What on earth are you talking about?" And that, my friends, was just the beginning. I'm not just talking about a little tiff or a bit of back and forth arguing. What unfolded that day and the following weeks and months, well, that was the slow, deliberate unraveling of my entire world. And as she spoke, the things she said made me question every decision I had ever made as a parent, every ounce of effort I had poured into her upbringing. The whole story goes much, much deeper. I needed help with my home. What I got instead was a family feud that would ruin everything. And just when you think the story couldn't get any worse, trust me, it does. Let's get right back to it. That phone call was a Pandora's box, and once my daughter opened it, there was no putting the horrors back inside. Her words, "I didn't ask to give birth to me," just hung there in the air, thick and poisonous. I was sputtering, trying to form a sentence, when she continued, and her voice was no longer that of my daughter. It was cold, practiced, like she was reading from a script. She said, "Mom, let's be realistic here. You're not getting any older. This house is too big for you. It's a money pit. The upkeep is, well, frankly, it's a burden. It's a burden on you, and it's becoming a burden on us."
Us? The word hit me like a physical blow. When had helping her mother with a few hours of dusting become a burden on us? And that's when I heard him. Mark, my son-in-law. His voice was faint in the background, a smooth, buttery murmur. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. He was coaching her. "Mark and I have been talking," Ashley went on, her voice a little stronger now, a little more confident. "We're worried about you. We think it might be time to start thinking about other options." Other options. You know, it's funny how a simple phrase can be so loaded with menace. I knew exactly what other options meant. It meant a one-bedroom apartment in some dreary senior living facility. It meant selling my house, the house I'd brought her home to from the hospital, the house where I'd patched up her scraped knees and hosted her sweet 16 party, the house that held every single memory of our life together. "What are you suggesting, Ashley?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We found a place," she said, her voice brightening with a sickeningly false cheerfulness. "It's called Golden Meadows. It's lovely. They have a community garden and shuffleboard and a dining hall, so you won't have to worry about cooking anymore. We could sell the house, pay for your spot there, and then we could use the rest of the equity to finally build that addition we need for little Emily's playroom. It's a win-win." A win-win. My mind was reeling. They hadn't just thought about this, they had planned this. They had researched facilities. They had allocated my money. My life's work, the equity I had painstakingly built over 40 years, had already been mentally spent on a playroom. The casual cruelty of it knocked the wind out of me. I felt like a line item on their budget, an obstacle to be managed. This is where I have to tell you something. I have to explain why this wasn't just hurtful. It was a profound betrayal. You see, 5 years ago, when Ashley and Mark wanted to buy their first home, they didn't have a down payment. The market was crazy, and they were getting discouraged. I saw their dreams slipping away, so what did I do? I went to the bank, and I took out a home equity line of credit on my house. I gave them $60,000. It was a gift. I never asked for a penny back. I just wanted them to be happy. I leveraged my own security, my own home, to build theirs. And now, they were looking at my home, the very source of their own stability, and seeing nothing but a piggy bank they wanted to smash open. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. The phone call ended with me mumbling something non-committal just to get her off the line. I hung up and slid down the kitchen wall until I was sitting on the cold linoleum. I sat there for a long time, the silence of my too big house pressing in on me. The dust bunnies I'd wanted help with suddenly seemed like the least of my problems. I wasn't just losing my daughter, I was being actively erased by her. The next day, they came over. They didn't call first, just showed up on my doorstep, Mark holding a glossy brochure for Golden Meadows, and Ashley carrying a box of donuts, as if a Boston cream could somehow sweeten the deal of shipping your own mother off to be forgotten. "Mom, we wanted to talk to you in person," Mark said, his smile so wide and phony it made my skin crawl. He walked into my living room like he already owned the place, his eyes scanning the walls, the furniture, assessing the value. Ashley, for her part, wouldn't look me in the eye. She busied herself with the donuts, arranging them on a plate from my kitchen cabinet, a cabinet she apparently no longer needed my permission to open. I let them talk. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one with the worn-out fabric where my head rests, and I just listened. Mark did most of the talking. He laid out their whole plan with the slick confidence of a used car salesman. He talked about unlocking the potential of my asset and downsizing to a more manageable lifestyle. He used every corporate buzzword you can imagine to describe dismantling my entire life. He explained how the real estate market was hot right now, how they'd already spoken to a realtor, a friend of his, of course, who was very optimistic about the asking price. They could have it on the market within a month. He painted a picture of my future for me, a sterile room, scheduled meals, and bingo on Tuesdays, all while he and his family enjoyed a brand new playroom paid for with the bones of my life.
I looked over at my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful girl, the one who used to write me little "I love you" notes and leave them on my pillow. She was just nodding along, her eyes fixed on the coffee table, a perfect little puppet. It was clear who was pulling the strings. Mark had planted this idea in her head, nurtured it, and twisted her sensitivity into a sense of entitlement. He'd convinced her that this wasn't a betrayal, it was a sound financial strategy. And as I sat there, something inside me shifted. The heart-wrenching pain began to recede, and in its place, a cold, quiet anger began to grow. The kind of anger that doesn't scream and shout, but that watches and waits and plans. I looked at Mark's smug face, at his perfectly ironed polo shirt, and at the brochure he'd so thoughtfully placed in front of me. I looked at my daughter, who wouldn't even meet my gaze, and I realized they had made a very, very big mistake. They thought they were dealing with a frail old woman who was losing her grip. They'd forgotten who I was. They'd forgotten that I was the woman who had clawed her way up from nothing to give my daughter everything. They thought I was a burden. They were about to find out I was their reckoning. I smiled. It was a small, tight-lipped smile, but it was genuine. "You know what?" I said, my voice calm and steady. "Let me see that brochure." Mark's face split into a grin so wide I could practically see his molars. It was the look of a predator who has just watched the prey stumble right into the trap. Ashley, on the other hand, let out a tiny, audible relief. My compliance was making this whole ugly business so much easier for her. "Of course, Mom," Mark said, practically shoving the brochure into my hands. "Take a look. It's a top-notch facility. Really, it's more like a resort." I took it. The paper was thick and glossy, featuring smiling, silver-haired seniors playing lawn bowls and laughing over a game of bridge. It looked like a prison for the happy. I slowly flipped through the pages, my finger tracing a picture of a sterile-looking room that was half the size of my living room. I put on the performance of a lifetime. I let my shoulders slump. I sniffled a little. I allowed a single, perfect tear to trace a path down my cheek. My armchair wouldn't fit in here," I whispered, my voice cracking with carefully manufactured grief. "We can get you a new one, Mom," Ashley chirped, jumping on what she perceived as a sign of acceptance. "A nice modern recliner. It'll be so much more comfortable for you." They stayed for another hour, helpfully outlining all the ways my life would improve once I was unburdened by my memories and my possessions. They talked and planned around me as if I were a piece of furniture they were deciding how best to reupholster. When they finally left, promising to call their realtor friend first thing Monday morning, they were practically floating on air. Mark gave my shoulder a patronizing squeeze on his way out. "You're doing the right thing, Carol, for everyone." The moment the front door clicked shut, the performance ended. I stood up, walked into my kitchen, and poured myself a very large glass of Chardonnay. I leaned against the counter, the same counter where I'd helped Ashley with her homework and frosted 1,000 birthday cakes,
and I let the rage wash over me. They saw tears in my eyes and thought it was sadness. Oh, they were tears all right, but not of sorrow. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to my little brother, David. David is 5 years older than me, a retired police detective who can smell nonsense from a mile away. He'd never been Mark's biggest fan, always saying he was too slick by half. "Davy," I said when he picked up, "you need to hear this." I told him everything, the phone call, the Golden Meadows brochure, the talk of selling my house for a playroom. The silence on his end of the line was heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously calm, the way it got when he was truly furious. "That slimy, good-for-nothing little weasel," he said, "and that was just the printable part. And Ashley went along with this? Ashley? He's got her twisted around his little finger, Davy. She thinks this is a win-win." "A win-win," he repeated with disgust. "Okay, Carol, here's what we're going to do. You're not going to sign a thing. You're not going to agree to a thing. You are going to let them think they're winning. Let that little Napoleon lay out his whole battle plan, and you are going to call your lawyer. Right now, you still have Margaret's number, right?" Of course I had Margaret's number. Margaret had handled my divorce all those years ago and helped me set up my will. She was sharp as a tack and took no prisoners. Talking to David had solidified my resolve. My spine felt like it was made of steel. My next call was to her. I explained the situation, and Margaret listened patiently, only interrupting to ask a clarifying question here and there. "Okay, Carol," she said once I was done. "First, let's get the legal facts straight. The house is in your name and your name only, correct? The mortgage was paid off 7 years ago?" "Correct on both counts," I confirmed. "Then they can't force you to sell, period. They can try to bully you, they can try to make your life miserable, but they cannot legally compel you to sign that house over. As for the $60,000 you gave them," Margaret sighed, "was there any paperwork, a gift letter, a loan agreement?" "No," I admitted, feeling a pang of my own foolishness. "It was a gift. I just transferred the money from the line of credit to their account." "That's what I figured. It complicates things. Legally, a gift is a gift. We can't claw it back. However," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "it's a hell of a moral lever. We keep that in our back pocket. For now, your brother is right. Play along. Agree to meet this realtor. I want you to get a name. I want you to listen to everything he says. Take notes if you have to. Let's see just how deep this little conspiracy goes. Do not, under any circumstances, sign an exclusive listing agreement or anything else. Just nod and smile. Can you do that?" "Margaret," I said, a slow, predatory grin spreading across my face, "I can do that with bells on." Just as predicted, Ashley called me Monday afternoon, bubbling with excitement. "Mom, great news! Mark's friend, Jim, can meet with us at your house on Wednesday afternoon. He's one of the top realtors in the area. Isn't that wonderful?" "Oh, that's great, sweetie," I said, laying the frail and confused act on thick. "Whatever you and Mark think is best." "It is, Mom, it really is," she gushed, completely oblivious. "We'll be there at 2 o'clock. We'll handle everything." "Oh, I bet you will," I thought to myself as I hung up the phone. I looked around my home, at the grandfather clock in the hall that my father had built, at the crayon marks on the bottom of the kitchen wall that I never had the heart to paint over, at the worn, comfortable divot in my armchair. This wasn't just a house. This was my life. This was my fortress. And they were trying to storm the gates with a real estate agent and a box of donuts? They had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. The stage was set. The players were in position. They thought they were directing this little drama, but they had no idea I was the one who had rewritten the entire script. The meeting with their pet realtor was next, and I was going to give the performance of a lifetime. Wednesday arrived right on schedule, and with it, my daughter and her conniving husband, along with their secret weapon, Jim, the top realtor. He was exactly what you'd expect. Tall, tan, teeth so white they could double as emergency flares. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my first car and exuded an overpowering aroma of expensive cologne and smugness. He shook my hand, his grip a little too firm, his smile a little too practiced. "Carol, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said, his eyes already sweeping over my living room, doing a mental calculation of every object. "Mark and Ashley have told me so much about you." "I'm sure they have," I replied, my voice a delicate, wobbly thing. I gestured vaguely toward my armchair. "Please, sit down." For the next hour, Jim held court in my living room. Mark and Ashley sat on my sofa, looking like proud parents at a recital as their boy wonder performed. He laid it on thick, using all the buzzwords Mark had clearly been coached on. He talked about curb appeal and staging. He used the phrase "great bones" at least 5 times. He walked from room to room, nodding approvingly, occasionally pointing out something that would need a minor cosmetic touch-up. "We'd want to declutter, of course," he said, gesturing to my bookshelves, which were filled with books I had actually read. "Less personal items, more neutral tones. We want potential buyers to be able to envision their life here, not yours." The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. He sat back down at my dining room table and opened a sleek leather portfolio. He had comps. He had market analysis. He had a whole plan of attack. He suggested a listing price that was, I had to admit, quite impressive. The number made Mark's eyes light up like a slot machine.
"And with the market as hot as it is," Jim concluded, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I anticipate a very quick sale. We could even see multiple offers. Bidding war." Mark was practically vibrating with excitement. Ashley just kept nodding, her gaze fixed on the potential dollar signs dancing in the air. This was the moment, the grand finale. Jim slid a document across the table. "This is just the standard listing agreement," he said, his voice as smooth as silk. "It gives me exclusive rights to represent you for a period of 90 days. If you just sign at the bottom, we can get the photographer in here by Friday and have this on the market by Monday." I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. I picked up the pen he offered me. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the dotted line, then I looked up, directly at Mark, his smug, expectant face. Then I looked at Ashley, who finally met my gaze for a fleeting second before looking away, unable to stomach the finality of what she was doing. I placed the pen back down on the table, with a soft click. "No," I said. The change in the room's atmosphere was instantaneous. Jim's perfect smile faltered. Mark's face went from triumph to confusion in a split second. "Mom," Ashley said with a voice laced with confusion, "what's wrong?" "I'm not signing this," I repeated, my voice stronger now, the feeble act completely gone. I pushed the papers back across the table toward Jim. "In fact, you can pack up your shiny little portfolio and see yourself out of my house." Jim was flabbergasted. I don't understand. Mark, Ashley, you told me she was on board." "She was," Mark insisted, turning to me, his face flushing with anger. "What the hell is this, Carol? We had a deal." "No, Mark, you had a plan," I said, standing up. It felt good to be on my feet, to look down on him for a change.
You had a plan to sell my house, stick me in a glorified waiting room for the Grim Reaper, and use my money to build a playroom for your kid. That wasn't a deal. That was a hostile takeover, and it's not happening. Ashley looked like she'd been slapped. Mom, that's not what we're doing. We're worried about you. We're trying to help you. Help me? I let out a short, sharp laugh. It held no humor. You call this help? You think my life, my home, my memories are just assets to be liquidated for your convenience? You come into my home with this vulture? I gestured at Jim, who looked deeply uncomfortable. And you expect me to just roll over and play dead? Did you really think I was that senile, that weak? I walked over to the antique secretary desk in the corner of the room. I unlocked the top drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of a bank statement from my home equity line of credit, dated 5 years ago. I walked back to the table and slapped it down in front of Ashley. Do you recognize that, sweetie? I asked. She stared at it, her face paling. The date, the avoidance amount, $60,000. That, I said, my voice as cold and hard as granite, that was the down payment for your house, your dream home. It came from this house, from my equity, the equity you are now so eager to spend on a playroom. It wasn't a loan, it was a gift, because I loved you and I wanted you to be happy. I sacrificed a piece of my own security for yours, and you have the audacity to come in here and tell me that my home, my security, is a burden? Ashley was speechless. She looked at the paper, then at me, then at Mark. The gears were finally turning. For the first time, she was seeing this not as a practical solution, but as the greedy, callous betrayal it truly was. Mark, however, was doubling down. This is emotional blackmail, Carol. That was 5 years ago. It has nothing to do with what's best for you now. Oh, you want to talk about what's best for me now? What's best for me is to be in my own home. What's best for me is to be surrounded by the things I love. And what's best for me is to not have a manipulative, greedy little toad like you trying to run my life. So let me be crystal clear. Jim, I said, turning to the realtor, who was already trying to inch his way out toward the door, you're fired. Mark, Ashley, our conversation is over. Get out of my house now. My words hung in the air, sharp and final. Jim couldn't get his briefcase packed fast enough. He mumbled a hasty goodbye and practically bolted out the door. The trap had been sprung, but not in the way they expected. This wasn't the end. Oh no, this was just the beginning of their consequences, and I was just getting warmed up.
The aftermath of that explosion was a thick, ringing silence. Jim the realtor had vanished like a puff of smoke, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and a stunned son-in-law. Mark was staring at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. The confident salesman was gone, replaced by a red-faced man-child who had just had his favorite toy snatched away. Ashley was the first to break the silence. She was crying now, fat, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Mom, I didn't see it that way. Well, you should have, I said, my voice still hard. I wasn't ready to let her off the hook. Not yet. You're my daughter. You, of all people, should have known better. You let him convince you that I was just a problem to be solved. Mark finally found his voice, and it was dripping with venom. You're a selfish old woman. You're sitting on a gold mine while your family struggles. Struggles? I laughed. A real, genuine laugh this time. It felt good. Is that what you call it, Mark? You're struggling so much that you need a brand new playroom? I struggled. I struggled as a single mother to raise that young woman over there, to make sure she had everything she needed. I struggled to pay off this house so I would have security in my old age. You don't know the first thing about struggle. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. I believe I told you both to get out. Ashley looked at me, her eyes pleading. Mom, please. No, I said firmly. I need time to think. And you, I pointed a finger at her, need to do some serious thinking of your own. You need to decide who you are, Ashley. Are you the daughter I raised, or are you just his accomplice? That last word landed with the force of a punch. She flinched, then looked at her husband, whose face was a mask of pure fury. Without another word, she turned and walked out the door. Mark hesitated, shot me a look that could have curdled milk, and then followed her. I watched them get into their overpriced SUV and drive away, leaving me alone in the sudden, blessed quiet of my home. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't a breath of relief. Not exactly. It was a breath of grim satisfaction. I had won the battle, but I knew the war was far from over. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I didn't hear a peep from Ashley. I knew Mark wouldn't let this go. He wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. I spent that time strategizing. I spoke with Margaret, my lawyer, again, updating her on what had happened. She was delighted. Bravo, Carol, you handled that perfectly. Now they know you're not a pushover. But be prepared, the next move will be different. He'll try to paint you as incompetent or unable to care for yourself. She was right. The following week, I got a call. It wasn't from Ashley or Mark. It was from a woman who identified herself as a social worker from Adult Protective Services. Mrs. Miller, she said, her voice professionally gentle, we've received an anonymous report expressing some concerns about your well-being. They said you might be having trouble managing on your own and that your home environment might not be safe. We'd like to schedule a time to come by for a home visit. Anonymous. Right. I could practically smell Mark's cheap aftershave through the phone lines. This was his next move. If he couldn't convince me to sell, he'd tried to have me declared incompetent so he could get control and sell it anyway. My blood ran cold, but my voice was calm when I answered. Of course, I said. I have nothing to hide. When would be a good time for you? We scheduled the visit for 2 days later. As soon as I hung up, I called my brother David. Davy, I said, it's happening. Phase 2 of Operation Get Rid of Mom. David, ever the retired detective, immediately switched into investigation mode. Okay, do not panic. They're trying to build a case against you. We're going to build a better one. He was at my house within an hour. We walked through every room. All right, Carol, we're going to clean. Not just tidy up. We're going to make this place shine like the top of the Chrysler Building.
And that's exactly what we did. David, bless his heart, got down on his hands and knees and scrubbed floors. I cleaned and polished every surface until it gleamed. We decluttered, we organized. When we were done, the house wasn't just clean, it was immaculate. It looked like a page out of Good Housekeeping. Next, David had me make some phone calls. I called my family doctor and scheduled a checkup, specifically asking for a cognitive assessment. I called my bank and got printouts of my accounts, showing them to be in perfect order. I gathered my bills, all paid on time. We were building a portfolio of my competence. The day of the visit, I was ready. When the social worker, a pleasant-faced woman named Miss Evans, arrived, I greeted her at the door with a warm smile and a plate of freshly baked cookies. My brother David was there too, introduced simply as my brother, who drops by to visit often. I gave her the grand tour. I showed her my spotless kitchen, my organized pantry, my clean bathrooms. She made notes on her clipboard, her expression unreadable. We sat down in the living room and I offered her coffee. "Your home is lovely, Mrs. Miller," she commented. "Thank you,"
I said, "I've lived here for over 40 years. It holds a lot of memories." She asked me a series of questions about my daily routines, my health, my social activities. I answered them calmly and clearly, mentioning my book club, my weekly lunches with friends, and my plans to redo the garden in the spring. I showed her my file of documents, the doctor's appointment confirmation, the clean bill of health, the financial statements. "Mrs. Miller," she said finally, looking up from her notes, "the report we received mentioned you seemed confused and that the house was in a state of neglect. I have to say that's not what I'm seeing here at all." "I'm not surprised to hear that's what the report said," I replied, my voice steady. "I have reason to believe the anonymous call came from my son-in-law. We've had a disagreement recently. He and my daughter want me to sell my home and move into an assisted living facility. When I refused, I believe this was his next step." I saw a flicker of understanding in Miss Evans's eyes. This was not the first time she'd seen family squabbles over property disguised as concern. She closed her notebook. "Well, Carol, based on what I've seen today, you are more than capable of managing your own affairs. Your home is safe, and you seem to be in excellent health and spirits. I will be closing this case. There is no reason for any further action from our department." After she left, David and I had a celebratory cup of coffee. I had dodged the bullet. Mark's plan had backfired spectacularly. Not only had he failed to have me declared incompetent, but he had also officially put himself on the Adult Protective Services radar as a potentially malicious reporter. He had tried to use the system against me, but he underestimated me again. He didn't realize I knew how to work the system too. The anger I felt had now cooled into a diamond-hard resolve. He wanted a war? Fine. But he was bringing a knife to a gunfight, and I had the entire arsenal on my side. I was a mother, a grandmother, a homeowner, and a taxpayer in good standing. And I was just getting started.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!